The type of vibe that was in the courtroom at the time was really hurtful to us. We were unable to be in our feelings and listen to the testimony without having extreme emotion. I'll say it this way. This was a woman who had killed her own children and was on trial for doing that and for killing Tammy, and felt that she could have had more respect for the family members in the courtroom. Tammy was a most excellent person, and she led her life with the utmost dignity and was beloved not only by our family, but by the community at large. There will be a huge void, and this is Tammy's story, and therefore it's part of our family history. This statement will not be about Lori. It will be about Tammy because it's her story. It's her life that was taken. She was a mom, a grandma, a daughter, a sister, a niece, a cousin, friend, and yes, she was a librarian. But more than a librarian, she was a teacher. She loved her job and went above and beyond for her students. Her last days filled with preparing a book fair for underserved children. I'm sure when she arrived home Friday, October 18th, 2019, she was very tired from a long day and the hours at school. As she got into bed that night, I would imagine she was thinking the same thing as every other night. Nothing more than getting a good night's sleep once her eldest had checked in from his late night job. She had no idea what the plan was for that night, or what had been the plan for quite some time. Unbeknownst to her, there had been quite a bit of discussion about how to get rid of the obstacles that Lori had. Lori had already killed 2 of her children. Tammy was next on her list of obstacle removal. Lori wanted money, sex, and more power, and what Lori wants, Lori gets. The plan was in place on how to get it. Instead of a good night's sleep, Tammy was brutally executed in her own bed. She was taken from us by murdering thieves. Lori sits here, convicted and prepped for prison. And let's be honest, the only question left is for how long? But Tammy was robbed of her entire life. And all of her family robbed of ever seeing her again. Never will she whisper a joke with a friend and laugh. Never see another sunrise or a sunset. Never smell fresh rain or see her grandchildren stomp through a mud puddle. Never to hear being called grandma or mom. Not another birthday, Christmas, birth of a grandchild, or graduation from preschool. No seeing pictures of prom, first dates, or weddings. No searching for something fun to do or growing a garden. Never attending one of our families just for the girls' lunches where we reconnected from all over, laughed about the good old times, and the funny way that Grandma Cooper took pictures. And then we'd take photos with each other that we would compare at the next lunch. There would never be another hilarious rendition of Patty and her singing "Do Your Ears Hang Low." She'd never wave at a friend as they passed by. Make dinner for a sick friend. Never have a last conversation with her beautiful mother. Or one last kiss goodbye. No more of her dad's dad jokes or Samantha's outdoor parties. No more lining up with all of her siblings to get the photo at the next event. A life full of people she loved and who loved her deeply. Her life was snuffed out.
To say heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, unbearable is not a big enough statement to convey knowing the way this most excellent existence was taken by planning and execution. The most innocent of lives was simply just discarded like it meant nothing, but it did. And like all of Lucille's grandchildren, her life was a vibe. It was a valiant and unreproachable life. Lori, you participated in the savage murders of precious people of great value and worth. It is most likely something that you would probably never understand, to be selfish and just to live life in a simple way, enjoying life for what it is, to love, to be loved, to smile, and to be smiled at. While you had a shameful relationship with Tammy's husband and planned out a murder, Tammy lived her life. She supported her family in every way. And for you to turn her home where she lived and slept into a cemetery, her two innocent and beautiful children, is one of the most horrific things I can think of. Tammy would have been horrified to know what you had done and it has broken us as a family. You are now going to pay the price, albeit never sufficient in this life. It's all that we can do. I hope that the life you live is filled with fear and that every day you are terrified, just the way that beautiful Tylee lived in fear for hers and sweet JJ as you continue terrifying her by saying they would be zombies. And she knew the consequences of being what you call dark. Tylee had many wonderful friends that loved her, and in a cruel irony, my granddaughter was a good friend to Tylee. This friend group can still to this day not speak of Tylee freely. They are so stuck in their grief and sadness for their friend who is savagely brutalized and murdered at her mother's hands. It's unconscionable to them, and the grief is still overwhelming. In closing, I would like to thank all of the law enforcement, the FBI, the investigators, the prosecutors, the administration. Everybody has worked so diligently on this case. I especially want to thank those who had to see those things that can't be unseen. We understand your pain also, and grateful for the many, many hours of hard work and dedication and the search for the truth. Thank you, Judge. I trust that you will do the correct penalty for this. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hoban, thank you for your impact statement. Mr. Wood.
The next victim will be Kay Woodcock.
All right, Ms. Woodcock.
Good day, Judge Boyce. I want to express my thanks and appreciation for being able to speak publicly today on the impact of the defendant's actions. Thank you. 80, 1401, 1481, 1, 72, 1536, 0, 52, 8, 72, 319, and finally, 1 million. These are more than just numbers and very important numbers and will make sense as I continue. 80 days ago, on May 12, 2023, the word guilty was read for each of the charges inmate Daybell is being sentenced for today. Guilty, the word cemented what I had known for 1,401 days, was returned by the jury. The jury devoted their time, energy, and dedication to deliver justice for J.J. Tiley and Tammy for every single heinous crime charged. Our family is eternally grateful for their sacrifice. Justice would not have been possible without the time, perseverance, and tireless work every member of multiple law enforcement agencies, prosecution team, court personnel, and the court. Our appreciation and thanks can never be expressed in a way that will adequately or effectively convey our gratitude. Today marks 1,481 days that have been filled with terror. One was the day my brother Charles was murdered. It took over 30 hours for the defendant to finally send a cold-hearted text to Charles's sons, informing them that their father was dead. No phone call, no explanation as to how, when, and where. Cole and Zach immediately called me, hoping this was a cruel joke.
Your Honor, I'm going to object, as this has nothing to do with this case.
It's overruled, Mr. Thomas.
Thank
You can continue, Ms. Woodcock.
This was the beginning of her cruel campaign of terror, a campaign that resulted in the deaths of JJ and Tylee, two innocent children, and Tammy, a devoted mother, grandmother, and wife. Our intense fear for JJ's safety began the very moment we learned of Charles's death. We knew Lori didn't want JJ anymore, as we had seen her abandon him for 72 days with little to no concern of his well-being. We now understand that this was so she could carry on her illicit and torrid affair with Chad Daybell and to conspire with him to murder and profit from my brother's death. With the number of divorces in Larry's past, it took me a while to understand why my brother had to die. I now realize what a nothing Chad Daybell is. A man with no ability to support anyone, no success of his own, a user of the weak-minded, a lazy, good-for-nothing, spineless man that rode his wife's coattails of success. After learning of Charles's death, I immediately began reaching out to Lori. I began calling, leaving voicemails, and texting. Finally, after 3 long hours, I received a brief text with 0 details. She couldn't be bothered or felt too guilty to pick up a phone and call, this time his sister, and explain what happened. It set out so many alarms for Larry and I. Within minutes, we were on the phone with an Arizona detective learning the horrifying truths of my brother's murder. This all began with greed. The greed for and desire for a $1 million life insurance policy. She should have answered my calls. She should have spoken to me. I would have given her the money. She could have let JJ and Tylee live and had $1 million. She could have been free to be Chad's mistress and foot the bill with the money from spilled blood. JJ and Tylee could have been with us living happy lives. Instead, she took all that away, all because she is a money-hungry, power-mongering monster. We flew to Arizona the next morning and were finally able to meet with the detective shortly after. We learned the frightful details of my brother being ambushed by Lori and Alex. I know my brother, and what we were hearing made no sense to the kind, gentle, and generous and loving man we knew him to be. After hearing the details, our immediate concern was JJ's safety. We had no legal rights to JJ. This simply left our hands tied. We were powerless then and have felt overwhelmingly powerless since. It is the most unwanted and terrible feeling to be in that position. I pray no one ever must deal with this type of circumstance. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I would say not even Lori or Chad, but their evil and malicious plans are why we are here. She has shown no grief for the lives she willingly took or the pain she caused. Today, I take the power back by standing here speaking out loud of all the pain and loss she caused. I pray that my words will assist you. My sincerest hope is that they will be seriously contemplated in imposing a sentence for her cruel and heinous crimes. During the trial, a lot of information was shared about JJ's death. Today, I want to share how he lived. That is truly the only way to understand and know who he was and the gaping hole his death has left in our hearts and in this world. Kanan Todd Trahan came into this world fighting on May 25th, 2012, 10 weeks premature and weighing in at a tiny but mighty 2 pounds and 14 ounces. He was transferred to a hospital with neonatal intensive care unit within minutes of being born, where he spent weeks fighting to grow and live. I remember seeing him for the first time. My son Todd, his biological father, and I had followed the ambulance to the hospital. He was about 2 hours old when we were finally able to see him. He was so tiny and looked so fragile. In fact, I still have one of his tiny preemie diapers. It fits in the palm of my hand. As soon as I laid my eyes on him, I knew he was my grandson. He was the tiniest version of my son, Todd, who was also seeing him for the first time. Todd struck with the love for him that can't be explained. The love that hits new parents can't be put into words. I remember him later saying, "How can I love someone I've never met this much?" It is a feeling I and millions of others have experienced at the birth of a child. Lori, Todd forgives you. I wanted to make sure you know that. While he was in the NICU, I was only able to see him for a few minutes at a time until I was notified he could be released to Larry and I in a few days. When we were initially asked if Kanan could come home with us, Larry and I didn't hesitate and immediately said yes, even though it had been 25 years since I had a new baby at home and never a preemie with their many medical needs. The only place we wanted him to be at home with us was at home with us. The night before he was discharged, I stayed in a little room next to the NICU, talking to the nurses and learning all the little things that our little preemie grandbaby would need. The next day, when it was time to leave, the nurse brought a wheelchair in and said, "Have a seat, and I will get you out of here." I looked at her and kind of perplexed. "I don't need a wheelchair. I can walk." She gave me a smile and a little chuckle and then let me know it's hospital policy for discharged babies. So I sat in the wheelchair, took Kanan in my arms, and was wheeled out of the hospital just like a new mama. I felt so much pride for this little baby who had not only overcome being born 10 weeks early, but also being born with illicit substances in his tiny little body. He was healthy and ready to come home well before he was expected, and my pride in him knew no bounds. We knew then that he was a champion and oh so very special. That day began an amazing experience of raising our cherished little man. His first night home, as I bathed him, he cried so hard, and I cried right along with him. My heart was so heavy with all that he had been through in just the few short weeks since his birth. After his bath and still crying, my husband Larry, who JJ called Pawpaw, asked me to hand Kanan to him. He placed our baby Kanan on his bare chest and wrapped his robe around him, gently breathing on his head, rhythmically patted his back. Larry kept patting and breathing warmth onto the top of his head until he finally relaxed, stopped crying, and fell asleep. This became a daily occurrence, part of our routine. He would hold him for hours so that Kanan would feel loved, comforted, and secure. I saw my husband in a new light. Larry jumped in feet first at 65 years old and did all the things a young and new father should and more. It made our relationship grow and gave us a new strength. Kanan was our strength and we were his comfort. His first 6 months were spent going to countless appointments. We went to appointments with doctors, heart, kidney, and urology problems, then to appointments for speech and occupational therapy, as well as visits to other pediatricians for a host of medical problems. We were always going from one appointment to another, constantly working to help him thrive and grow. That, along with loving him, was our number one priority. At each appointment, it became inevitable for me to cry. It deeply wounded me to see him go through so much, but I also felt immense pride in seeing him grow and how much love and happiness he gave to us and everyone that met him. My sister Susan had a special bond with Kanan and spent her days watching him so that I could work. She used to take him for walks, pushing his stroller endlessly. She could get him to belly laugh with silly animal noises, especially the froggy noise. There is no sweeter sound than a baby with an ecstatic belly laugh. Memories of the time spent watching Kanan grow, discovering his hands, toes, and feet, are all Susan has left of that special bond, and the immense grief of his loss is overwhelming. At 6 months old, the time came for the surgery. He needed to repair a hernia. Charles and Lori flew to be with us at the Children's Hospital in New Orleans. This was a scary moment in time for us. Our tiny little man was undergoing surgery, and their support meant so much to us. After his surgery, Lori insisted I take the sofa as she slept overnight on the floor of the hospital room. Later, the decision was made to let Charles and Lori adopt Kanan. I knew she would always be 1,000% involved in his care, and I knew it would be okay since I witnessed that. She would always be there to help support and care for Kanan. That is part of why this is so hard. How does a woman that would go to that length for a baby boy a few short years later brutally take his life? It is mind-blowing, and I will never understand it. Charles and Lori were granted custody a short time later. It was then Kanan became JJ. It was happy and devastating at the same time. We loved every minute of raising him. We poured all our love, energy into ensuring he grew and thrived. We knew our unconditional love, and that time was priceless. Kanan's growth and milestones were clear evidence for our love for him. We knew the adoption was the best decision for his future, to have energetic parents, siblings, and access to the types of schools and services we didn't have in Lake Charles, Louisiana. With his departure, we felt a grief that really can only be compared to the grief of losing someone to death, which is now a feeling we all know too well. We had barely made it 30 days before we were standing on Charles's front steps to love on our baby. When the door opened, there he was in his little baby walker, and I swear I saw tears in his eyes at seeing us. He had missed us too. Before I could take a step, Larry swooped him up in his arms, and at 11 months old, JJ wrapped his tiny arms around Larry, laying his head on him. There it was, the connection. It was still so strong. We never lost that special connection with JJ. We were always in love, comfort, and safety. JJ's adoption was final in July of 2014, and Charles and Lori moved with the kids to Hawaii, living in a house that backed up to a closed golf course, and it was perfect for JJ. It was like having the biggest backyard ever, and it was heaven for him. He would go outside, and he would run and run and run and run, and I ran and ran to chase him and catch up to him. Somehow, he never, ever ran out of energy. JJ also had no fear, and everything was an adventure. He climbed on everything, and he could do it in the blink of an eye. We have pictures sent from Charles of JJ sitting on top of refrigerators and cabinets with a grin on his face. Listening to testimony during the trial and hearing the defendant claim to others that he turned into a demon for doing what he had always done devastates me. How dare she take his energy and adventurous nature and turn it into a reason to further her murderous conspiracy. We would visit Hawaii every 4 to 5 months and stay 10, 14 days. We needed to soak up as much JJ time as we could. On one trip in the winter of 2015, JJ stayed home with me while Charles and Lori went to church. I was making a big pot of gumbo. I had to bring a little bit of Louisiana home cooking to Charles, and JJ was excited to help me. We pulled up a stool. He poured ingredient after ingredient. I can still see him standing next to me pouring chicken broth in the pot. Afterwards, he climbed on the counter and just watched, taking it all in. It is a memory that I will always cherish and dearly hold on to. During our visits with Charles or Lori, Charles or Lori would comment on how JJ would do things with us that were in stark contrast for them. He always awoke at the crack of dawn, never sleeping any later. However, when we would visit, we would have him sleep with us. JJ would ask Pawpaw to pat his back, just like when he was a baby, and fall asleep. He would sleep until 9 or 10, which astonished them. There was never a doubt he had an innate and unbroken attachment to us. Each visit, no matter where they lived, Lori always expressed her deep appreciation that we gave them the greatest gift ever in JJ. Lori loved to entertain and have family visit, ours and hers. She invited family and friends to Hawaii and friends from Hawaii to Arizona. 0 is the number. That same mother murdered that same child she expressed her deep appreciation for. It is mind-boggling, and I don't think I will ever be able to understand it. Back to JJ, he was incredibly smart. He was reading at middle school level by the time he was 4. I remember being in a store with JJ and on the aisle with eye drops, and there he was reading off the labels. Visine, cysteine, antihistamine, one long word after another. I hadn't seen him do that before, so you can imagine my surprise and delight. As we stood there, he would occasionally stumble on a syllable or pronunciation, but we took the time to go through the words and helped him learn. As he got a little older, his special education school in Arizona told Charles he was a math savant. He could calculate anything. I continually wonder what he would have become, what type of man would he be? What did Lori deprive the world of? JJ loved school, loved his family, friends, and cousins, especially his cousin Braxy. The two of them had such a special bond and love for each other. There are so many lives he touched, from family, teachers, neighbors, and church members that all feel the immense pain and loss of him being gone. Not only was JJ smart, but he was also funny, content, healthy, compassionate, and an empathetic child. JJ didn't show his empathy and compassion with hugs and kisses. In fact, you had to chase him down for those.